Hey everyone, I'm Isaiah from Prather Audio, and today I'm going to be teaching you 3 ways to fit subdrops into dense modern metal mixes. First and foremost, I think the most important thing is actually using a subdrop that is in the key of your song. This is important for a couple different reasons, but one of the main things especially is when you're in a dense mix like this where you've got a couple different guitar layers, you've got some heavy bass going on, a bunch of really low-end heavy drums. You want to make sure that this bass drop is not going to throw things off when it pops up in the mix because it is a lot of low-end at once. Generally, you can pitch a subdrop if you don't have a subdrop that's for the right note of your song. And there's a couple different ways to do that. I really won't go into it too deep here, but a simple way in Cubase would just be using like the stock pitch shift. And if you don't have a pack where you know the starting notes of the drops, I actually have a free pack you can download from the description that you can pitch however you need to for your own music. So the first main mixing trick that I want to go over here is something really simple and often overlooked by metal producers because it's a really common trick used in stuff like EDM and hip hop, which is compressing with sidechain. One of the biggest things that I do with subdrops is always using sidechain against the bass low end. I feel like this really allows me to keep a really huge low end throughout the rest of the song, being able to keep it really clean once the subdrops come in. One of the most common things you'll hear with subdrops is that they're either too quiet or they're too loud and the mix starts to really fall apart in the low end once it gets to the right volume. And that's because a lot of the times you really need to pull back on the bass low end to be able to make room for the subdrop. So on this compressor, I have really simple settings. I have a super fast attack, super fast hold, super fast release. And this is generally because I really don't want the bass low end to be pulled back unless the subdrop is present and loud. So it's always going to be hitting. But the point is as soon as it's done, I really want the bass low end to be popping right back up as fast as possible. So here's what it sounds like without the sidechain. And you're going to hear that it's kind of just a little bit too much low end once it all hits at the same time. And now with. So the next thing I'm going to go over is adding harmonics with distortion to your subdrops. This is one of those things that I use a ton in my mixes for a couple reasons. The one being that it actually allows you to hear this on smaller speakers because a lot of speakers really aren't going to pick up much of this drop once it drops below 100 to 80 hertz, especially if they're on something like a phone, you're really not going to hear something like that. So doing this allows us to hear this on a smaller speaker, but it also allows it to kind of fit into a dense mix like this a little bit more. Think of it kind of like the way we mix a bass. We don't really like a super clean bass sound in metal because the distorted sound just helps it blend a little bit more. So that's kind of the same thought process I'm going on with here. This distortion I'm using is just a stock Cubase distortion. It's one of my favorites. I like this one because you can also kind of dial out some of this low end and high end from what you're doing. Generally, I keep the high end kind of where it's at, but for the most part, I try to just cut anything below too low of what I want because you're still going to get some of those harmonics present in the sample itself. So I don't really want to mess with too much of the low lows because once you are that low, I want to keep it pretty clean. But just in the mid-range, we want to kind of beef it up. So I've got the boost a little bit here. The mix is about halfway, so it's not really crushing the low end of our sample too much. And we're getting some drive here, but it's a really simple sound. But I want to show you guys how it sounds and just show you how much it stands out more in the mix without having to go too crazy on the volume. And now with. So the clean subdrop sound that we started with sounded like this. And this is what we got for the final sound. This next one here is one of my favorites, and it's definitely on pretty much every mix that I do with the subdrop. And this one is taking the subdrop and sending it past the mix bus compression. This one's super helpful because the situation is with a subdrop, you have a lot of low end information coming in at once. And that oftentimes is just going to overload your compressor once you get it to the right volume that you need it to be for the track. And especially when you have a sample like this that has a lot of punch and low end to it, you really want to make sure that you're not messing up the rest of your track's compression. For example, like that sound has a big punch to it. You can get that one in the drops pack that I have available. There's a link in the description for that as well. I like to think about it like this. When the sub drop comes in, if you're not routing past the compressor, when it's also having to make up for that low end that's coming in, it's also going to be pulling down the high end, like your cymbals, your guitars, your vocals. And if you don't want those things to be affected by your sub drop and you want it to stack more so than kind of pull down everything else, that's probably one of the best ways, in my opinion, for making this work. So first we're going to send it through the bus comp so I can show you what it sounds like when it's starting to pull everything else down. So as you can tell, when it hit, it really started to swallow the guitars, and you could audibly hear that the mids really kind of sunk down and the sub drop really became the sole focus of the mix. And that's because the compression was making sure that that kind of stayed at the top, and it really kind of just pulled everything together a little bit more. Now, that sound may be desirable if you're going for something that's kind of like a really obnoxious sounding sub drop, but I'm actually going for something a little more subtle and mainly just adding impact to what's already there. So here's what it sounds like when you send it straight to the limiter versus going to the bus compressor. So as you can see, it kept all of the punch that we needed, but it still allowed the rest of the mix to shine and not really get too swallowed up, which is a super important thing when you're mixing a dense song like this. I hope this video was helpful. If there's anything else you'd like to see, let me know in the comments below. It's super appreciated. And a huge shout out to Asylus and Fate Destroyed for letting me use our sessions in this video. If you enjoyed the music, please be sure to go give them some love in the description. And finally, if you're looking for some new sub drop sounds, I have 2 new packs available on my site, including a free pack, so you can start implementing these tricks into your music today. Be sure to go find those links if that's something you're interested in, and stay creative and have a good day.